Hello, everybody. Roger Durling here, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and I'm deeply honored that we're here with Edoardo Ponti, co-writer and director of the film, The Life Ahead. But before we start our conversation, we have a little treat. We have a message from the great Sophia Loren. So let's listen to that.
Hello, I'm Sophia Loren. This film is so special to me, especially because it was directed by my son, Edoardo Ponti. Together, Edoardo and I discovered the beautiful book on which the film is based by Roman Gary, and I fell in love with the character of Madame Rosa. This film is a moving story of friendship between two characters who on the surface share no common ground: race, religion, culture, and generation. And yet, these two souls share a common destiny, building a deep bond. It was my honor to tell this story with my co-star Ibrahima, who was an amazing scene partner. We hope you enjoy the film as much as we enjoyed making it. Thank you.
Well, welcome, Eduardo. I can't, it's so sweet that she actually has to introduce herself. We know it's Sophia Loren. Welcome. I actually want to pick up on something that you mentioned when we were offline, that, you started this film 4 years ago, and we were talking about how timely the film is. Your mother was talking about the issues of race, religion, culture, that are at the foreground of the film. Can you talk about that? The fact that the project was started 4 years ago, but it has gotten more timely as time went by.
First of all, Roger, thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. So thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Well, thank you.
It's a project. Yeah, the project in my life started when I was 16 years old, really, because it's at that time that I read the novel by Romain Gary, La Vie devant soi, for the first time. And it's one of those novels that once it sinks its tentacles in you, its roots in you, it just never leaves you, because it has such a truth to it. And what I loved then, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to make the movie, is because Romain Gary told the story through the point of view of this 13-year-old immigrant child.
Yeah, Momo.
Momo. And there is nothing more important for empathy than to start seeing life through the eyes of another person. And that's really what kept me going. What kept me going back to the book was really that, seeing life through the eyes of another. And then, of course, you cut to 4 years ago, and it was the right time for my mother to inhabit the role of Madame Rosa. She was the right age. It was the right time. And of course, now the movie not only do the themes align themselves with the time and the situation that we're going through, but I think even more importantly, the theme of empathy is one that is so urgent and so important. We have to be able to embrace each other, especially for our differences, because those differences are the things that make us special, make us who we are.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about the film, is that they're so different, but ultimately, they find commonality, and we go through this journey of them finding the commonality between each other. You mentioned a novel. The novel was written in 1975, and it took place in France. Could you tell us about transposing it not just to Italy, but Bari, and also to a contemporary time.
Yeah. So the transposition from, so the original novel was set in a Paris suburb called Belleville, and we transposed it to Bari. We transposed it to Bari because it had the same kind of mix of cultural DNA. You know, Bari is a very, very important port town, so it's a crossroad of a lot of activity of religion, culture, merchants. You know, it's very, very busy in that kind of, you know, cross-cultural way, and also cross-racial way. And so it really kind of fit the energy of Belleville in the 70s. It was the same kind of thing. And also Bari's colors, you know, just aesthetic colors, you
Yeah.
know, is so beautiful. You know, it is I mean, it is a very, very old town, and around it, these kind of new neighborhoods have kind of mushrooms. New, of course, relatively new, because, you know, they're like, you know, built in the 20s. But you have this combination of the new and the old, the past and the present, which creates not only a beautiful kind of versatile look, but also the right tension for the story.
And you know, the idea of it being contemporary, like, you know, the novel, as I mentioned, was in the 1970s, but it is shocking to me that the issues that the of inclusion, of immigration, of prejudice are still so prevalent in Bari today. You know, can you talk about that?
I mean, it seems like, you know, we're just taking ant steps towards the conclusion of these themes. And what is incredible, as you say, is that the themes that the book espoused then of immigration, of prejudice, of discrimination, of injustice, are exactly the same today, if not maybe more prevalent, because we shone light on so many corners of society that maybe then we didn't know about. So it's even a bigger problem today, or the problem has been exposed more thoroughly today than it was in the 1970s, you know. You know, and so it was really something for us. It was a very important story to tell, for that very reason, and also for the reason that these two characters, you know, Madame Rosa and Momo, even though everything separates them, as we talked about, you know, race, culture, religion, but in the end, they're two opposite sides of the same coin. You know, they've both been raised without a family. They've both been essentially raised on the streets. And they've been defined by their background, by really they've been defined also by their resilience, and that's where they connect via that resilience. They connect via the shared legacy of the fact that they're both in their own right survivors.
Tell us about finding the right actor to play Momo, who's terrific, by the way. Ibrahima go ahead.
Yes, Ibrahima Gueye. Yes.
Gueye.
First of all, it was very difficult to find the right Madame Rosa because I could not find her. And then my mother was like, "Listen, you can't find anybody? Hell, I'll do it." And I said, okay, why not? You know what? Sure, if you must, but I'm sure I can find somebody better. Of course, I'm kidding. She was always the one, the only, the first, the last Madame Rosa that I could ever work with, because it's always such an absolute pleasure working with my mother. And if you, as a director, have the good fortune of having Sophia Loren as your mother, you would be silly not to cast her.
Which actually, you know, before I forget, the idea that it was in Bari, you know, I mentioned before we came on that, you know, my mom is Italian, and the Neapolitans have a particular accent, a particular way of moving. And, you know, was that part of the allure to have your mother act with the Neapolitan accent? And because there's a physicality
Of
to.
course. No. There are many, many things. And my job as a director is to create an environment where the actor can thrive. And by thriving means reaching the notes that are the most authentic to the moment. That's my job, essentially. And with my mother, I knew that if I allowed her to speak Neapolitan in the movie, we would be getting these notes. I did the same thing when we adapted The Human Voice by Jean Cocteau. I had it translated in Neapolitan, and it was here the same idea, because when my mother hits those Neapolitan words, she hits notes inside that are so endemic to who she is. You know, she goes back to being that girl, you know, from Pozzuoli, you know, born, you know, under the bombings and the hunger of the Second World War. Not only does her physicality, as you say, change, but also her voice changes. It drops a tone, because Neapolitan is not born in the throat or in the head or even in the heart. It's born in the gut.
Yeah.
And so she acquires, when she speaks Neapolitan, a certain grit, a certain kind of, you know, energy that was perfect for Madame Rosa. Which is also very interesting, is that Neapolitans have this amazing ability to combine drama, but at the same time lacing it with irony and comedy, because there's a comedy to resignation for Neapolitans. There's a comedy to crying. And so everything she does, especially in the first 30 minutes of the movie, is very Neapolitan in that way. It's very kind of dramatic, but at the same time ironic. You know, it's that kind of, you know, blade that she walks on, you know, when she is Neapolitan, when she kind of, you know, expresses those qualities, which I love.
I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because I always, I have a big smile watching the movie, and the fact that she's surrounded by kids, and obviously she needs the kids, but then there is sometimes I think you mentioned the word irony, that she may not be that keen into having
No,
this
no,
kid.
no. Typical. She's very irreverent, you know, but I mean, that's the trick, right? To create a character that is irreverent, that is, you know, really dismissive, and often, but at the same time, extremely likable. And that's when you cast Sophia Loren, to be able to have that combination, because she can push the envelope of being irreverent and, you know, fuck this, fuck that. But at the same time, you love her because you know that her heart is in the right place. And that's important for the role.
So how difficult, now that we get past how difficult it was to get her,
Yes.
how difficult was it to get the right Ibrahima?
Yeah, well, you
I
know
mean,
what?
the right Momo, sorry.
Yeah, of course. So I looked at around 350 children,
Wow.
and he was the first. And I could have stopped there, but because I'm a sucker for punishment, I continued for 349 others. And what happened was, he was amazing, because the audition was a very special moment in understanding who he is. You know, the audition was improvising that scene where he steals the candlesticks and he tries to sell them to Ruspa and Nala. So the audition process was, you walk into the room and you try to sell me those candlesticks. As he tried to walk into the room, the door got stuck. And instead of breaking scene and interrupting the moment and telling me, I'm sorry, I can't get in, the door is stuck, he used it in the audition. He used the fact that the door got stuck. And as he was doing the scene, I thought, how interesting. He's never acted in his life, and he has the instincts of an actor. And after that, I started speaking to him after the audition, and I saw that inside of him, he had such a light behind his eyes, and his heart was so apparent and evocative in the way that he conducted himself, you know, that I kept on thinking of him, and I kept on going in the process, because I don't stop at the first person that I'm going to meet, even though he had already struck me, you know, as a potential. But the more I saw people, the more I saw these wonderful other kids, the more I always went back to Momo, went back to Ibra. And I'll never forget, when I told them, I after an exhaustive search, after putting him through 4 weeks of an acting workshop with 3 other potential Momos, he finally got the role.
Wow.
And I went to his place, and I told him that he got the role, and he looked at me in the eyes and he said, "I'm gonna give everything to this." And he was 13 years old, and at 13 years old, I believed him as deeply as if he was 50 years old. There was such a strength, such a commitment, such a desire to do this, that I gave him the keys to my movie.
Oh, that's so amazing. How and the relationship that he has with Madame Rosa, how did you develop that? I mean, about the two actors.
Yeah,
Get it?
it's tricky for many reasons. It's tricky because this was Ibra's first movie, and it was my mother's 110th movie, something like that. It's also tricky because, God knows what people told Ibra about my mother. I mean, he's co-starring opposite Sophia Loren in an Italian movie. So, I mean, I can't imagine the things that people, oh my God, do you realize what you're doing? So it was very important for me to demystify all this in his mind, and for him to be able to relate to my mother the way that I relate to my mother. So what we did is we decided to all live together in the same house. So in pre-production and in principal photography in Bari, we all lived under the same roof. Him, his father, and me, my whole family, my mother, and everything, so that they could gravitate towards each other in a very natural way, and he could experience my mother the way I experience her, in the morning over breakfast, at night watching television. Sometimes I would catch them sitting on a bench overlooking the ocean, just sitting there, not doing anything, just existing together. And that created a rapport that demystified her in his eyes. The hardest thing for him wasn't so much the parts where he had to love her because he loved her. It was the parts in the beginning where he had to be really rude to her. And when we started rehearsing this, I realized that he wasn't really getting to the point where we would say, that, he really had to be really rude to her to really kind of be able to paint that arc for the character. And one day, that goes back to his instincts also as an actor. One day he walks up to my mother and tells her, Sophia, I'm not even sure he called her Sophia, that I'm not sure he called her anything. You know what I mean? He was so kind of nervous. But he said, I have to tell you, every time that I have to say all these bad things to you, when we rehearse them, when I go back in my room, I feel so bad and my heart really breaks. Would you mind giving me permission to be rude to you? Which, and my mother was kind of taken aback. She was like, well, of course. It's acting. I'm not going to get hurt. You can say it as long as we're acting, she said. You can say anything you want to me. It's no problem at all. So they joked about it and they laughed. And from that moment on, he could not have been ruder to my mother, and I could not have been happier. It was amazing. But he saw the inside the actor studio somewhere, and he kind of got that thing. But here it was just him. It was just him coming up with his own instincts as an actor. Amazing.
Well, he's terrific. You are using the word demystifying, and I was quite impressed with the way you present Madame Rosa at first, where you're giving us, vivid colors, and and she looks like very glamorous, but slowly through the film, you start stripping her, and can you talk about that visual journey that you present Madame Rosa through?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, my mother in the movie, the first time we see her, she's almost an extra, because it is when Momo steals the candlesticks in the
Yes,
market, right? So that's really an anti-introduction for an icon like Sophia Loren, and I like that because it showed that we were going to tell the story through the point of view of this child, and through the point of view of this child, this woman means nothing to him in the beginning.
correct.
And so we are kind of taken aback, because is that how we're going to introduce Sophia Loren in her first movie in 10 years? Yeah, that's how we're going to introduce her, because that's how he sees her. So it was very freeing for me to be able to tell that story through that point of view, because I was very disciplined to keep it to that point of view, you know. And then what I wanted to do was, you know, you can't reinvent it. It would be silly to reinvent Sophia Loren. There's nothing to reinvent. She's a woman whose legacy speaks volumes. So the trick for me is always the same, which is maintain the iconography of Sophia Loren, but grounded in what I know about her, grounded in what I love about her. And what was important for me in the beginning of the movie was exactly what you said, which is present Sophia Loren in a way that people are comfortable, a version of her that people can relate to, that people are familiar with. And
Mm,
slowly, as the disease takes root, then I started removing those elements that people felt comfortable with Sophia Loren. Because what happens with these illnesses, of course, is the thing that goes is your identity, right? And so it was really an evolution of stripping her costume of color, but also changing her makeup, right? From the kind of the traditional kind of Sophia Loren, kind of more current version of the cat eye that we know. Then we removed that. Then we slowly started shortening her eyelashes to the point where in the end, she has the last 4 scenes of the movie, from the hospital, from when he breaks her out of the hospital to the last scene, my mother has zero makeup. And when I'm saying zero makeup is her, our first shot was at 8, she would show up at 7:45 because there was no
wow.
makeup. There was nothing. And this is a testament of her commitment to the movie, her commitment to that role, to the veracity, to the authenticity of that role. The thing that I'm actually most proud of, because it was the only struggle that I had with my mother during the movie, was her hair. I love her hair in the movie. And
Yeah,
this is my third movie with my mother. And the other 2 movies, I let the normal process of my mother's kind of thing happen with her hair. My mother is a perfectionist, so she doesn't like her hair to move, because then she thinks about it and it gets in her way. And when she's in the moment, she doesn't want to have to think of, oh, I had a strand of hair here, and so now I have to get it out of my face. She doesn't like it. So normally when you see movies, not when she was very young, but let's say from 50 on, her hair doesn't really move in her movies. And in this movie, I told her, Mama, your hair has to move. Your hair has to move. Your hair has to get in the way. I don't care if it's in the way. It has to get in the way. So every morning, so we had a wonderful, hairdresser, Enzo Angileri, who's really a great, great artist. And I told her in confidence, and I told him in confidence, we have to do something. I want a completely different hair look for my mother. So it's going to be hard. She's going to resist, but we got to do it. And she put it on. And every morning for the 40 days of shooting, she would come up to me and he says, you like this? Because that's a mess. And every morning, I would tell her, Mama, it's perfect. And she was like, okay, it's your movie. Okay, fine. This is what you think. This is what you think. And it was so wonderful, because after everything, when all was said and done, she saw the movie and she looked at me and she said, you know what? You were right about the hair. It's nice.
There are two just harrowing scenes that are, I get so emotional watching them. The one where, she's in the rain in the top floor, and also the scene where she loses her way through, in the olive fields. Can you tell us about directing those scenes and yeah,
Yeah.
what it was like.
You know, the first scene was, you know, I was very this is the element of Madame Rosa that I knew that I would work on very, very diligently with my mother and with our research people to make sure that we got it right. Because my mother has never done such a thing, you know, and I think it's one of the reasons why she even wanted to sink her teeth into the role, because my mother is an artist in that way. My mother wants to push the boundaries of what she's done, so she was very excited to be able to explore other things that she hadn't done. And this, you know, to be the victim of such an illness, to try to really portray it and convey it in an honest way, was something that she was excited about. So after speaking to our medical consultant, after understanding what the condition would elicit as far as symptoms, we realized that there are as many manifestations of the symptom as there are patients, because the brain is such a complicated thing that it is really very much the symptom is tied to the person and how that person is. So what was wonderful was how my mother gave herself, and these two scenes that you talk about are two very different scenes. The first one, when my mother has that paralysis, it was it was very mechanical, because I was watching her and I could tell, you know, so it was very much about me making sure that her eye line was correct, her face was correct, and I know her face so well that I know what every micro inch of her skin can tell a different story. And because she can't see herself, I was really her eyes, and I was telling her, lower your chin, look there. And then when we had the right face, then I said, don't move, don't move. Whatever happens, that's what you need to be like. And we turn on the rain, and as the rain starts to fall, she starts naturally to blink. And I cut the scene and I go back to my mother, and you know, and that shows the rapport that we have. And you know, I said,
Hmm.
Mom, it's everything is good, but you're blinking, and it looks like you're conscious, even though blinking wouldn't have been an issue in that, you know, medically, but it just didn't look right. So I asked her, don't blink. And she looked at me like I was a bit crazy. And she said, but you know, it's very hard for me not to blink because the water's falling on my in my eye. And I said, I know it's impossible. And she said, okay, let me just try. And I called action, and we did it 5 times, and she never blinked. And because she entered a trance that even defied the water in her eyes. She was so in that moment that even when Ibra claps in her face, it's very hard not to blink when somebody claps in your face like this. It's very different.
Right.
It's a normal instinct. She just didn't. She entered a place that was, and you know, when these things happen with my mother, I don't ask her. I don't ask her where she goes, because it's her private thing. And every artist is entitled to having their own private spaces that a director should not kind of invade. So I didn't say a thing. At the end of the scene, after 4 hours under the rain, I just hugged her and I thanked her
Yeah. Wow.
for being the artist and the person that she is.
It's a beautiful scene. Uh, you have her dance, and it's glorious. To me, huge cinephile, huge fan of your mom. It harked back to her famous dance in front of Marcello. You know, can you tell us
Yeah.
that, about dancing with Lola?
Yeah. You know, she was very nervous about that, because as you say, you know, she there are many amazing film moments with, you know, Sophia Loren dancing. And she was very nervous, you know, at her age, can I still do it? Can I still dance? And even though we rehearsed it and it was fine and she could absolutely do it and it was lovely, she was still very, very nervous. And this is a moment where there created a beautiful bond in between her and Abril Zamora, who plays Lola. Because my mother was kind of nervous because the camera was really essentially dancing around them and with the cables and everything. And my mother was nervous about all the activity and was I going to fall and everything. And Abril just looked at her and says, "You will never fall in my arms, and I will never let that happen. So don't you worry." And it was so beautiful to see these two wonderful actresses relying on each other and giving each other what the other needed for the moment to be as joyful and as touching as it is. It's a moment. It's the first time that we see Madame Rosa as a joyful person, full of light, full of warmth. And it was very important. And that moment was created thanks to the mutual trust, really, that these two actresses had with each other. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment. And I remember the other thing that really helped it is that my mother loves Brazilian music. I mean, loves Brazilian music. So it was almost impossible for her, even if she had a broken foot, she would have danced to Elsa Suarez because she loves Elsa Suarez so much. So it was me finding the right elements so that I knew it would become irresistible for her to dance. And we pumped up the music very loud. It was like a nightclub, and she just loved it, and she kind of let loose. And it's really, really beautiful to see these two actresses let loose in such a way, in such a context.
Absolutely. And speaking of music, the score is gorgeous. Gabriel Yared, can you tell us about collaborating with Gabriel?
Yeah, well, Gabriel is, I'm such a fan, and I'm such a fan, not only because he is a great music scholar, and that really means that he has such a deep knowledge of music that he very easily and seamlessly can braid, lace, and combine together different influences. And that's all packaged in his second amazing ability, which is composing simple but unforgettable melodies. And for me, that's what I always seek out from my composers. I want to be able to leave the movie theater or leave my living room or leave whatever I've been, wherever I've been watching the movie, and be able to hum the soul of the movie. And the soul of the movie is always the music. The
Hmm.
soul of the movie is two things: the music and the hundreds of people behind the camera who made the movie and the atmosphere that was on set. That's the soul of the movie. And so Gabriel really captured the soul of the movie, especially, I think, Madame Rosa's theme with those Hebraic kind of undertones, which is both haunting but also so romantic and just delicate. It's delicate. He's delicate, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. And then Diane Warren penned a song. How many times has this lady been nominated for the Oscar?
Yeah,
And
she's been nominated 11 more times than me.
and
11
she's
times.
in such incredible songs and hasn't won yet. We
Listen, she's amazing, and what I love about her is this: I got a cold call from her already. Who am I to get a cold call from Diane Warren? It's amazing that Diane Warren just calls me out of the blue like this. She called me out of the blue and she said, I read your script and I want to write a song for you. And I mean, when Diane Warren calls you and tells you that you want to write a song, you just say two words: thank you. And that's it. And then you let her do her thing. So when she saw the movie, she came she came to our house here she showed up with a guitar and a broken hand, and she walked up into my living room, and Diane Warren sang the song for me with her broken hand and her guitar. And
Wow.
it was amazing. And what I love about that is how, she's worked with, she's, as you said, Oscar nominated 11 times. She's worked with the greatest filmmakers. She could, be so standoffish with a director like me who's, who hasn't done 100th of what she's done or what other directors have done that she's worked with. But that's not what motivates her. What motivates her is her passion once she's written a song she loves, and when that happens, she needs to share it, she needs to show it to you, she needs to listen to it. And what's beautiful is that when she does this, she's so childlike, she's so excited, she's it's like it's her first song. That's how beautiful and how amazing she is, and why she's special. She's special because no matter the fact that she's written, I don't know, 35,000 hits, my song felt like the first and only song she had ever composed, because this
Wow.
was the moment for this. And that's a testament to how wonderful she is. And that's why she's who she is. She's who she is because she works purely from her heart and that commitment.
Um, Film geek and me have to ask you about one of my wonderful favorite actors, Babak Karimi,
Yes,
who was in Ashghar Farhadi films.
absolutely.
Can you tell us, he plays Mr. Hamil,
Yes.
can you tell us about working with Babak?
Well, as you, I was a big fan of Babak through Ashghar Farhadi's films. And what's interesting is that, I don't know if you know this, but Babak didn't start off as an actor. He
Oh, no, I
started
didn't.
off he started off as a film editor in Italy.
Oh, wow.
And that's why he speaks Italian so well, because his kind of first job in Italy in the film industry was to be a film editor. But his passion for acting was always gnawing at him, and he never quite had he was always kind of squeamish about entering that world until he decided that the desire or the temptation were irresistible, so he ended up doing it. And what was beautiful about working with him was the stillness that he brought to the character. He's a man who is naturally very centered, very grounded. And when he speaks to Momo, he doesn't speak down to him. He speaks to him at his level. He speaks to him like an intelligent, smart human being growing up in the world. And that I think is the most beautiful aspect of the character. The character could have been lecturing, could have been slightly condescending, but Babak and our conversations together were always about moving it away from all this, and also moving it in a sphere where we, all of us, could relate to what he says, through how he says it, through his kindness, through his humanity, but also his humor. There are little moments here and there where kind of he allows himself to be funny and lighthearted, etc. And it was a joy to work with him. A joy. I absolutely, we only worked together for 5 days, but it was absolutely wonderful. He created a beautiful rapport. What was great about the rapport that he created with Ibra, going back to Ibra's instincts, is every actor that would come on the set, I would make sure that Ibra would have 2-3 days of rehearsal with them so that he felt comfortable. So on one of those days of rehearsal, Ibra had just finished work and we went to rehearse with Babak, and Ibra seemed a little bit kind of low energy. And I was, at the end of the rehearsal, I was like, why did you do this? Are you okay, Ibra? Are you tired? I said, no, I'm fine. I said, but you didn't seem to give as much as you normally give during the rehearsals. And he looked at me and says, oh no, but I did that on purpose. And I said, why? And he said, because when we're on the set and I really give it to him, he's going to be surprised and you'll capture that in your camera. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Um, I I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned before we come on that you had to do a lot of work during COVID to get the film, finished. Can you tell us about that process?
Yeah, it was I'm a person that always tries to, I'm a glass half full kind of person, so I don't allow myself to see that the glass is half empty. So what I can say is that it was a very difficult process, because working remotely, even doing this, is not as wonderful as we were together in the same room. So imagine having to, edit the final, minutes of the movie like this. I mean, it took 35,000 times longer than what it should have. But what it did give me was 2 to 2.5 extra months of post production. And that allowed me to work longer with our friend Gabriel Yared, the composer. And that really
Mm,
was wonderful, because it gave, what COVID, for in the creative process, what it gave me was room and space to think, room and space to reflect. It wasn't about, we weren't anymore driven with, the next, box that we need to check. Are we done with the ADR? We're doing this. No, it suddenly gave us the opportunity to think, reflect, look at the movie, and kind of have a sense. Is this exactly what we want? Is this moment exactly what it needs to be? How can we then enhance it or give it that extra spin with the music or not? And a lot of the conversations weren't so much about music, they were about silence. When don't we want to put music? And when do we want to stop the music to create silence? Another wonderful composer once said that music is composed to prepare the silence that comes after.
wow.
And that's
Yeah.
something that I've never forgotten, because it's true. It's true. Music can also do that. So our conversation with Gabriel weren't only about the specific cues, which of course is important, but it was really about that. It was placement and removing things. And when you remove something, what you insert the film with is emotional oxygen, is the ability for the audience to connect the dots that the filmmaker on purpose hasn't connected for you. And that's
Mhm.
investment. That's when the audience starts becoming emotionally invested, when they have to connect dots that we purposely did not connect for them.
Yeah. Well, I've kept you for a while here, Eduardo. What a joy to chat with you.
Me too.
It's a terrific film, and
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Roger.
Give my best to your mom, and congratulations to you both.
And please give my best to your mother too.
So sweet. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Eduardo. Hope to meet
Ciao.
you in person at some
Ciao,
point.
Roger. It would be a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Ciao.
Ciao, Roger. Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.